Have you ever wondered how it's possible that we can beam data from a satellite orbiting Jupiter to Earth in less than a second, yet struggle to understand our own emotional states or the forces shaping our modern lives? In the last century alone, we've charted galaxies billions of light years away, unraveled the code of life in the human genome, and mapped nearly every corner of the ocean floor. And yet, despite all this external mastery, many still lie awake at night, questioning the direction of their lives. This is not irony, it is the very nature of progress. Technological acceleration does not guarantee emotional or philosophical depth. We become engineers of the external world, even as our internal compass spins in unfamiliar terrain. But something else is happening, a measurable change, not in sentiment, but in signals. Earth itself, as a dynamic planetary system, exhibits patterns, frequencies that we've only recently begun to understand. Among them is the Schumann Resonance, a natural electromagnetic frequency that arises from the cavity between the Earth's surface and the ionosphere. For decades, this frequency hovered around 7.83 Hertz, stable, predictable. But in recent years, it has begun to fluctuate modestly but noticeably. Some interpret this as a signal of planetary transformation. And while it's tempting to leap into metaphysical conclusions, let us pause. Because science teaches us not just to observe patterns, but to interpret them carefully. These electromagnetic shifts do not speak in prophecies, they speak in data. The Earth's magnetic poles are moving faster than at any recorded time in modern history. Climate systems are growing more chaotic. Animal migration patterns are adjusting. Humans, with our complex biological sensitivity, are part of this ecological web, whether we acknowledge it or not. So the question is not, is something happening? That's obvious. The real question is, how do we respond to what's happening? Because this is where science meets philosophy. When the ground beneath use both figuratively and literally shifts, do we recoil in fear? Or do we rise to understand? If you could silence the noise of modern civilization, the hum of machines, the chatter of traffic, the endless pings of digital life, and simply listen, what would you hear? Not metaphorically, literally. What would you hear from the Earth itself? Beneath our feet and above our heads, the Earth is not quiet. The planet resonates. Lightning discharges across continents generate low-frequency electromagnetic waves that bounce between the ground and the ionosphere. These waves form what physicists call the Schumann Resonance, the heartbeat of the planet, if you will, not in a poetic sense, but as a measurable physical phenomenon. These frequencies, long thought stable, are now showing signs of variability. Scientists have recorded intermittent increases in their intensity and frequency. Is this a natural anomaly, a result of increasing electromagnetic interference from human technology? Or is it indicative of something more systemic, more planetary in scale? The Earth is a dynamic system. It has always changed. Its magnetic field reverses polarity every few 100,000 years. Tectonic plates shift continents over millennia. Climate systems oscillate in cycles that span centuries. None of this is new. What's new is our awareness of the unprecedented speed at which certain changes are unfolding. The magnetic poles are drifting faster than ever recorded. Climate models are being revised in real time. Ocean currents are slowing. Species are migrating earlier or not at all. And while all of this can be tracked, plotted, and predicted within the framework of science, there remains a central challenge: understanding our place in it all. In the past, we imagined ourselves separate from Earth's observers of nature, not participants. But modern science has erased that illusion. We now understand that human physiology, psychology, and even consciousness itself is deeply embedded in planetary systems. For example, your brain waves operate in frequency ranges that are strikingly similar to the Schumann resonance. That doesn't imply mysticism, it suggests sensitivity. Biological systems evolved within Earth's electromagnetic environment. Changes in that environment, therefore, cannot be dismissed as irrelevant to human function. So what does it mean when we sense disconnection, anxiety, or unease, not just as individuals, but as a species? Are we simply overstimulated by modern life? Or Are we perhaps subconsciously reacting to planetary signals that we haven't yet learned to consciously interpret? This is where the science gets fascinating. We are not just observing the Earth, we are interfacing with it biochemically, neurologically, electromagnetically. The Earth is not sending us messages, but it is providing conditions. And when those conditions change, so do we. But let us not stray into fantasy. The Earth does not think, it does not feel, it does not whisper. It follows the immutable laws of physics, gravitation, electromagnetism, thermodynamics. And yet, within those laws exists a canvas vast enough for life, for mind, and for meaning. So when we speak of a shift occurring, let's define it clearly. The shift is not cosmic prophecy, it's not planetary consciousness. It's a convergence of data, environmental, geophysical, biological, and social. It's a global system rebalancing itself under the strain of exponential change. Our challenge is not to mystify it, but to meet it with understanding. Consider this. For centuries, we measured success by how much we could extract from the Earth. Fossil fuels, minerals, timber resources converted into power, comfort, and growth. But now, those same patterns are destabilizing the systems upon which our civilization depends. This is not ideology, it's thermodynamics. Every system, biological or social, that consumes beyond its means will eventually enter imbalance. We are not exempt. The tone of the Earth is not a metaphor for awakening, it is a metaphor for feedback. A global feedback loop. The biosphere, the hydrosphere, the atmosphere are all reacting, adjusting, recalibrating. Not to punish us, but because that is what systems do. And the more we resist acknowledging these signals, the further out of sync we become, not just with the Earth, but with each other. Here's where the cosmos puts it all in perspective. We orbit an average star in the outer arm of a spiral galaxy, one of over 2 trillion galaxies in the observable universe. And yet, within this vast expanse, this tiny pale blue dot, as Carl Sagan called it, is the only place we know so far where life exists. And here's the kicker. Earth is not static. It evolves, not only geologically, but also chemically and biologically. Life adapts to Earth, and Earth responds to life. The two are not separate. They are intertwined in what planetary scientists now call Earth system science. So perhaps the greatest shift is not in the Earth's tone, but in ours. A shift in how we listen, how we think, how we act not as conquerors of nature, but as part of its orchestra. The Earth does not need saving. It has survived asteroid impacts and supervolcanoes. What's at stake is user continuity, our flourishing, our ability to remain part of the planetary system we inherited. The shift is near not because it arrives like a storm, but because it has already begun in our climate, in our technologies, in our relationships, in our questions. The universe does not ask us to believe, it asks us to observe. It rewards curiosity, not complacency. And in this moment, more than any other in our species' history, the tone of Earth scientifically, environmentally, socially is changing. The real test is whether we can change with it, guided not by fear, but by understanding. Not to escape Earth, not to transcend humanity, but to become worthy stewards of this extraordinary planet we call home. Because the Earth is not calling us to awaken, it's calling us to understand, and through understanding to act. Let's now consider something less visible, but no less real, ourselves. In recent years, many individuals report subtle shifts in their internal experience, heightened sensitivity to noise, an increasing desire for solitude, changes in sleep patterns, or even an inexplicable restlessness. These are not signs of global awakening, nor are they supernatural symptoms of Earth's so-called frequency shift. They are biological responses to a rapidly changing environment. Human beings evolved over hundreds of thousands of years in natural environments, open skies, stable circadian rhythms, communal bonds, seasonal cycles. But in the last century alone, we've introduced artificial light, 24/7 information flows, digital overstimulation, fragmented communities, and climate instability. The brain, as a product of evolution, is trying to adapt. But that adaptation is not always seamless. Disruptions in sleep, emotional volatility, attention fragmentation, these are neurological consequences of environments misaligned with our evolutionary design. Neuroscience tells us that the limbic system, which governs emotion, is highly responsive to environmental cues. Chronic exposure to stimuli like social media, polarized discourse, or ambient noise elevates baseline cortisol and disrupts the body's internal regulation systems. That's not metaphysical. That's measurable. When people say they feel more emotional, more anxious, or more tuned in to their surroundings, what they may be experiencing is not resonance in the mystical sense, but neuroplasticity in action, the brain rewiring itself in response to new levels of sensory input. And it gets even more interesting. Studies in behavioral psychology suggest that empathy, or ability to feel what others feel, is not fixed. It fluctuates depending on environmental conditions, cultural stimuli, and collective stress. So if it seems like more people are feeling more intensely, crying more easily, or sensing emotional undercurrents in others, it may reflect a recalibration of emotional bandwidth, survival adaptation in an age of systemic complexity. In physics, resonance is the amplification of vibration when a system is exposed to a frequency that matches its natural frequency. In the human body, the heart produces an electromagnetic field measurable several feet away. Your nervous system is attuned to rhythms, light, sound, temperature, and even the nonverbal signals of other people. So when someone walks into a room and feels the tension, they aren't tapping into metaphysical insight. They're likely picking up on facial microexpressions, muscle tension, voice tone, and spatial dynamics. It's not magic, it's biology, and it's quite elegant. In a way, you're an antenna-evolved sensor network capable of detecting subtle environmental changes. But now, the environment is flooded with conflicting inputs. News cycles, global crises, digital distractions. The nervous system, in response, becomes hyper-reactive or numb. That internal static you feel, it may not be mystical dissonance. It's your brain struggling to filter signal from noise in a world that no longer resembles the one it evolved in. Some have reported patterns they call synchronicities, thinking of someone just before they call, or noticing thematic overlaps in dreams and real-world events. While it's tempting to see these as cosmic messages, cognitive science offers another explanation: pattern recognition bias. The human brain is a master of finding pattern 7 where none exist. It's what kept our ancestors alive, noticing the movement in the bushes that might signal a predator, or sensing changes in tone that might suggest danger. In today's complex world, that same pattern-seeking faculty can generate feelings of meaningful coincidence. But rather than mystify it, let's marvel at what it represents: a highly evolved system for detecting relationship and rhythm in data. In fact, quantum mechanics, though often misused in spiritual discourse, teaches us something far more profound. Not that consciousness shapes reality, but that observation defines interaction. In this universe, relationship matters. Not because it's poetic, but because it's how particles, systems, and galaxies operate. So perhaps the most constructive response to this planetary shift is not to ask what the Earth is whispering to us, but to ask what science is revealing about ourselves. That we are deeply connected to our environment. That we are shaped by the information we consume. That our brains, hearts, and behaviors are constantly adapting to a world in flux. And that adaptation is not mysticism. It is biophysics. The real shift, then, is one of integration. Integrating environmental knowledge with personal responsibility, integrating emotional intelligence with scientific reasoning, integrating cosmic scale with daily choice. The Earth doesn't need us to spiritualize her resonance. She needs us to understand her systems. Because only through understanding can we act, not react with clarity. That is the calling of this moment. Not to escape into abstraction, but to engage with precision. Not to interpret change through superstition, but to measure it, study it, and respond with wisdom. Every generation imagines itself at the edge of transformation, but few possess the data to prove it. Today, we do. Atmospheric carbon levels higher than any time in the last 3 million years. Ocean temperatures breaking records. Global biodiversity collapsing at unprecedented rates. These are not warnings from prophets. They are measurements from instruments, subjective, repeatable, undeniable. And yet, there is hope not because we wish for it, but because we now understand how systems respond to pressure. In physics, there is a term, phase transition, when matter under stress reorganizes into a new state. Water to vapor, carbon to diamond. Civilization, too, can undergo phase transitions. But the energy required is not thermal, it is intellectual, moral, collaborative. The Earth isn't asking us to awaken spiritually. The Earth is telling us, through her data, through her systems, through her feedback loops, the conditions have changed. The equilibrium has shifted. Now, what will you do? It's easy to feel overwhelmed. After all, how can one person shift the trajectory of a planet? But let's return to physics again. In a complex system, coherence emerges not from one dominant force, but from many small forces aligning simultaneously. In other words, when individuals coordinate not by command, but by shared understanding, a system can reorganize itself. Not metaphor, mathematics. That's the real resonance, and not mystical vibration, but social synchrony, scientific insight, and ethical coherence. So how do we participate in this shift? We design technologies with long-term ecological feedback in mind. We make policy decisions informed by atmospheric chemistry, not polling cycles. We raise children to think beyond tribal lines toward planetary stewardship. Not because it's soft, not because it's spiritual, but because it's rational, because it's what the data, the science, and the survival equations all point to. It's time to redefine power not as dominance over nature, but as alignment with nature's principles. Time to redefine intelligence seno as abstract IQ, but as the capacity to integrate across disciplines. Physics, biology, sociology, ethics, and time to redefine progress not as acceleration, but as coherence when our systems, behaviors, and technologies harmonize with the Earth's capacity to sustain life. Some will ask, is this too idealistic? But what's truly naive believing a finite planet can absorb infinite extraction without consequence? Or choosing to use what we know, science, systems, theory, human cooperation, to course correct while we still can? Cynicism is not wisdom, it is surrender. The cosmos has no preference for human flourishing. It will continue star by star, galaxy by galaxy, regardless of what we do here. But we have a choice to be an accident of carbon or a conscious expression of cosmic curiosity. The Earth is not waiting to punish or to praise. She responds to force, not to faith. And right now, the forces we exert, social, political, ecological, are out of equilibrium. The tone has changed, not because it wants something from us, but because that's how systems behave under strain. So let us not speak of awakening as something mystical. Let us speak of it as becoming scientifically literate at the planetary scale. Let us act not, because we are heroes in some cosmic narrative, but because we are participants in a system worth preserving. That's the beauty of science. It doesn't demand belief. It demands participation. And that's the opportunity of this moment, not to become something more than human, but to become fully human-informed, integrated, and in rhythm with the world that made us. The Earth will continue to turn, but what kind of civilization spins with it? That's up to us.